When my wife collapsed in our honey barn last October, I thought her kidneys had finally given out. The doctors at Mission Hospital thought the same thing. Then, my wife passed away. But 10 days after we buried her, her best friend, a chemistry professor at the university, called me shaking. "Frank, I tested the honey jar Eleanor sent me before she died. There is antifreeze in it. Someone has been poisoning her. And Frank, the jar had your daughter's handwriting on the label. Hey everyone, welcome. I am grateful you are here. Where are you joining me from today? Drop your location in the comments below. Quick note: this is a fictional story crafted for reflection and entertainment. While the events are not real, the themes carry meaning I hope resonates with you. Let us continue. When my wife collapsed in our honey barn last October, I thought her kidneys had finally given out. The doctors at Mission Hospital thought the same thing. But 10 days after we buried her, everything I believed about my family shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Franklin Mercer. Most people call me Frank. I am 60 years old. I spent 25 years as a bridge engineer for the North Carolina Department of Transportation, designing and inspecting structures across the Blue Ridge Mountains. Before that, I earned my degree at NC State, where I learned that every bridge, every building, every structure in this world has a load-bearing point. Exceed that point, and everything collapses. I know how to read blueprints. I know how to spot a fracture in a steel beam before it gives way. But I could not see the fractures in my own family. I missed every warning sign, and it cost me everything. Eleanor was my compass for 36 years. We married when I was 24, and she was 22, in a tiny Presbyterian church on a hill overlooking the Blue Ridge Mountains. She was small, maybe 5'2", but she carried herself like a woman who could hold up the sky. She had dark hair that she kept pinned back with a tortoiseshell clip, and brown eyes that could read a person faster than any blueprint I ever studied. She worked as the head librarian at Asheville Public Library for 28 years. She ran the free reading program for underprivileged children, the one that served 3 generations of kids in this town. Every Saturday morning, she sat on a wooden stool in the children's section and read stories to a circle of small faces looking up at her like she held the answers to the universe. Maybe she did. When I retired at 55, Eleanor convinced me to try beekeeping. She had read a book about it, naturally, and decided it would keep me from going stir-crazy. So, we set up our first hive on the 12-acre farm we owned on the outskirts of Asheville. By the time Eleanor passed, we had 40 hives producing some of the finest wildflower honey in Buncombe County. I sold it at the River Arts District Farmers Market every Saturday. Eleanor handled the labels, the packaging, the bookkeeping. She handled everything. She always had. That October morning started the way. Every October morning started on our farm. Cool air, drifting down from the mountains. Mist sitting low in the valley. The smell of damp earth and fallen leaves, and something sweet from the hives. I was in the kitchen pouring my second cup of coffee when I heard the sound. Not a scream, not a call for help. Just a heavy, dull thud from the direction of the honey barn. The kind of sound a body makes when it hits a wooden floor. I set my coffee down. The mug was the blue one Eleanor had bought me at a craft fair in Weaverville. It had a small chip on the rim that she kept saying she would glue. She never did. I walked across the yard. The grass was wet. My boots left dark prints. The barn door was open. Eleanor always opened it first thing in the morning to let the air circulate through the honey jars. I could smell it before I saw her. Honey and lavender and something metallic. Something wrong. She was on the floor between the shelving units. Jars of honey lined the walls like amber sentinels. Morning light fell through the window and landed on her face. Her eyes were open, but they were not seeing anything. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. Her right hand twitched against the wooden planks, like she was trying to write something. I dropped to my knees beside her. "Eleanor, Eleanor, can you hear me?" Her skin was gray, not pale, gray, like the color had been drained out of her. I grabbed her hand. It was cold. October cold. But also something deeper, the kind of cold that comes from inside. I called 911. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. The dispatcher told me to keep her warm, keep talking to her, keep her conscious. I pulled off my flannel jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. I talked. I said her name over and over. I told her about the bees, about how the clover honey was almost ready, about how the morning light looked on the mountains. I said everything except what I was really thinking. Please do not leave me. Please. 36 years. Do not let it end on this floor. The ambulance took 11 minutes. I counted every one of them. The paramedics moved fast, efficient, professional. They loaded Eleanor onto a stretcher. I climbed into my old Ford pickup and followed the ambulance down the mountain road toward Mission Hospital. The siren echoed off the ridges. Red and blue lights painted the trees. At the hospital, they took her straight through. A nurse guided me to a small consultation room. White walls. A single window, looking out at the parking lot. A box of tissues on a table that had seen too many tears. I sat there and stared at my hands. They were calloused from years of carpentry and beekeeping. Strong hands. Useless hands. Hands that could not save the woman I loved. The doctor came in 20 minutes later. Young. Tired. A face that had clearly delivered this kind of news before. Mr. Mercer, I am very sorry. Your wife suffered acute kidney failure. Given her medical history, her kidneys had been deteriorating for some time. By the time the paramedics arrived, there was too much damage. She never regained consciousness. Eleanor was 58 years old. She did not smoke. She barely drank. She walked 2 miles every morning along the trail behind our property. She drank green tea with wildflower honey every single day. From our own hives. From jars our daughter labeled by hand. Did she have a history of kidney problems? The doctor asked. Yes. She had been having issues for about 8 months. Fatigue. Nausea. Confusion. The doctor nodded. Made a note. Expressed his condolences. I sat in that room alone for a long time. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me like a hive with no queen. Somewhere down the hall, machines beeped in steady rhythm, the sound of life being measured and found wanting. I called Cynthia, my daughter. She answered on the 4th ring. When I told her, there was a pause. A long pause. Then she cried. Or at least, she made the sounds of crying. I held the phone against my ear and listened. And something in my gut, something I could not name, told me those tears were not quite right. They were performed, rehearsed, like lines read from a script. But I pushed that thought away. What kind of father suspects his own daughter of faking grief? A paranoid one. A broken one. A wrong one. I was not wrong. She planned everything, my Eleanor. Our finances. Our retirement. The plot at Green Hills Cemetery under the dogwood tree she loved because it bloomed white every spring. And white meant hope, she said. White meant new beginnings. She planned everything except being murdered. But I did not know that yet. Let me tell you about the woman they took from me. Eleanor Grace Whitley married me on a Saturday afternoon in June, 1988. The ceremony was at the old Presbyterian church on Sunset Mountain. The one with the white steeple you can see from almost anywhere in Asheville if you know where to look. She wore her mother's dress, taken in at the waist because Eleanor was smaller. She carried wildflowers she had picked that morning. Black-eyed Susans, mountain laurel, a few stems of Queen Anne's lace. No roses, no lilies. That was Eleanor. She never wanted what was expensive. She wanted what was real. Her father, Arthur Whitley, owned a 60-acre farm in Sevier County, Tennessee. Tobacco and cattle. He died when Cynthia was 12 and left everything to Eleanor. She sold the farm 5 years later and put every dollar into a retirement fund. called it her rainy day money, and said she hoped it would never rain that hard. It rained harder than either of us could have imagined. For 28 years, Eleanor ran the Asheville Public Library like it was her second home. She started the Saturday reading program the year Cynthia was born, sitting on a wooden stool in the children's section, reading aloud to kids from families that could not afford books. 3 generations of Asheville children grew up listening to Eleanor's voice. At her funeral, one of those children, now a librarian herself, sobbed so hard she had to be helped outside. When the library switched to a digital catalog system in 2012, Eleanor kept the old wooden card catalog, had it delivered to our farmhouse and set it up in her reading room, the small room off the hallway where she spent her evenings. People thought it was sentimental. But Eleanor was never sentimental without purpose. Everything she kept for a reason. I would discover that reason 10 days after her funeral, in a drawer labeled Mercer. E.L. Restricted. But that comes later. The beekeeping started as her idea. The summer I retired, I was driving her crazy, following her around the house, reorganizing the garage for the 3rd time. One morning, she set a book on the kitchen table next to my coffee. "The Beekeeper's Handbook. Read this," she said. "Then build me some hives. I do not know anything about bees, Eleanor." She smiled. That smile that made you feel like the most important and most foolish person in the world at the same time. "You know how to build bridges, Frank. You can figure out a wooden box with some frames in it." So I did. 2 hives that first summer. From tulip poplar I milled myself. By September, we had our first harvest. 12 jars of wildflower honey, dark and rich, tasting like the mountains themselves. Eleanor labeled each one by hand. Mercer Farm Honey. Asheville, NC. Her handwriting was small, precise, librarian perfect. Within 3 years, we had 40 hives. I sold honey at the River Arts District Farmers Market. Eleanor handled the books, the orders, the labels. We were a team, always had been. She taught me the philosophy of bees through stories and patience. "Bees are the most honest creatures on earth, Frank," she told me one afternoon while we watched them work the clover. "They do not lie. They do not pretend. When something foreign enters the hive, they know immediately. They can smell it. Fear, disease, deception. The hive always knows." I should have listened more carefully. Cynthia was our only child. Born in 1990. She had Eleanor's dark hair and my stubbornness. Grew up running through these fields, helping her mother at the library, sitting on my workbench while I built things. She was bright, quick with numbers, had a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. She went to Appalachian State, studied business, moved to Charlotte. That is where she met Brandon Blake. He came to dinner for the first time on a Thursday evening in late September, 6 years ago. Drove up in a black SUV too expensive for someone who said he worked in nutritional supplements. He wore a sport coat that cost more than my truck payment and cologne, so strong the bees would have flagged him as a threat before he reached the porch. He shook my hand too hard. Smiled with his teeth but not his eyes. Complimented the farmhouse, the property, the mountain view, everything except Eleanor's cooking, which was the only thing that actually deserved a compliment. After dinner, Eleanor and I cleaned up. She washed, I dried. A ritual as old as our marriage. "I do not trust him," she said quietly. "You just met him." "I know. But his eyes calculate everything. He looked at this house like he was appraising it. He looked at Cynthia like she was an asset, not a person." "You are being overprotective," I said. "Cynthia is a grown woman." Eleanor stopped washing, turned to face me. "Frank, my gut is telling me this man is going to hurt her. Hurt us. I can feel it the way you feel a crack in a support beam before it gives way. Your gut is not always right, honey." But it was. Eleanor's gut had been screaming danger for 6 years, and I told her she was imagining things. I chose peace over protection. That choice cost Eleanor her life. Brandon Blake was a former pharmacist. He told us he had left the profession for entrepreneurship, but the truth was he had been fired from a CVS distribution center in Charlotte for stealing controlled substances. Blacklisted. So, he pivoted to nutritional supplements, partnering with a man named Ricky to sell products online that the FDA was already investigating for fraud. I did not know any of that then. I just knew I did not like his cologne, or the way he checked his phone during dinner. Cynthia married him 11 months later. Eleanor cried at the wedding. I assumed they were tears of joy. Looking back, I am not sure they were. Gerald Whitfield, my best friend since our engineering days at NC State, told me once over beers at the Highland Brewing Company. You know the problem with engineers, Frank? We trust structures. We trust math. But people are not bridges. They lie about their load-bearing capacity and then collapse on top of you. Jerry was right. He usually was. He had stood beside me at my wedding, held my hand when my mother passed, helped me build every one of those 40 hives. He would stand beside me again through things neither of us could have imagined. Eleanor had a routine every morning. She woke at 5:30, made green tea with a tablespoon of honey from our own hives, sat in her reading room with the cup and a book for exactly 1 hour. She called it her sanctuary. For the last 6 months of her life, Cynthia visited every Sunday. Always brought a fresh jar of honey. Said she had harvested it herself from the hives near the south pasture. Eleanor used that honey in her morning tea. Every single day. For 6 months. Eleanor used to say bees can smell a lie. That they know when something foreign enters the hive. I should have learned from them sooner. The morning we buried Eleanor. The Blue Ridge Mountains were wrapped in autumn fog so thick you could barely see the steeple of the Presbyterian church rising above it. It felt like even God was hiding from what was about to happen. October had turned the mountains into a cathedral of color. Red maples, golden birches, the deep bronze of white oaks lining the road up to the church. Eleanor would have loved it. She always said autumn in Asheville was God's way of apologizing for winter. I sat in the passenger seat of Jerry's truck because he refused to let me drive. You are in no condition, he had said that morning, standing in my kitchen, coffee already made, suit already pressed. Jerry Whitfield. The man did not ask if you needed help. He just showed up and started helping. The church sat on a hill overlooking the valley. A white clapboard building that had been standing since 1892. Eleanor and I were married there. Cynthia was baptized there. Pastor Daniel Hayes had served the congregation for 23 years. He had counseled Eleanor and me through the rough patch we hit in year 8 when I was working 70-hour weeks and she was raising Cynthia practically alone. He knew us. He knew what Eleanor meant to this town. The parking lot was already full when we arrived. I counted more than 60 cars. People lined up outside the front doors because the sanctuary only held about 120. Eleanor's colleagues from the library, parents of children she had read to over 3 decades, neighbors from the farms along our road, teachers from the elementary school where she volunteered, the owner of Malaprop's bookshop who had partnered with Eleanor on literacy drives every summer. They came because Eleanor touched their lives. She did it quietly, without fanfare, without expecting anything in return. A book recommended at exactly the right moment. A kind word when someone was falling apart. A Saturday morning spent reading to children who had nothing, giving them worlds they could escape into. Jerry walked beside me up the stone steps. His hand found my elbow. Steady. Present. Not a word. Inside, the sanctuary smelled of old wood and candle wax, and the gardenias someone had arranged along the altar. Gardenias. Eleanor's favorite. She grew them along the walkway at home. White blooms with a scent so sweet it could stop you mid-step. I had noticed yesterday that they were beginning to wilt, brown edges curling inward, as if they knew she was gone and were following her. The casket was white. Closed. I had chosen white roses for the spray, because Eleanor believed white meant hope. White meant beginnings. Even at an ending, I wanted to honor what she believed. Pastor Hayes stood at the pulpit, prayer book open. His voice filled the sanctuary, warm and steady. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." I had heard those words at funerals before. They never cut deep until they were about Eleanor. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." I was not sure about that part anymore. I was fairly sure I would fear everything now. Then I heard the footsteps, the particular sound of expensive shoes on old wooden floors. A rhythm I recognized. The way Brandon Blake walked into every room like he had already purchased it. Cynthia and Brandon arrived 20 minutes late. The entire congregation turned. My daughter wore a black designer dress and oversized sunglasses despite being indoors. She carried a handbag with a logo that screamed money louder than the organ. Her heels clicked against the pine floorboards with each step. Brandon wore a tailored black suit, crisp shirt, no tie. But it was the details that caught my attention. The Rolex on his wrist that threw tiny sparks of light across the pews. That cologne. I could smell it from 4 rows away, thick and chemical, the kind of scent that cost more than a week of groceries. Sweat darkened his collar despite the cool October air inside the church. They slid into the pew beside me without a word. Cynthia did not touch my arm, did not squeeze my hand, did not acknowledge me. She sat rigid, sunglasses still on, staring at the casket like it was a piece of furniture she was deciding whether to keep. Brandon checked his phone. Once, twice, 3 times in the first 2 minutes. His jaw was tight. His eyes darted around the room. Not grief. Something else. Something I recognized from my years on construction sites. The look of a man doing math in his head. Calculating risk. Measuring exits. Bees can smell fear. I thought about that, sitting in the pew with my wife's casket 10 feet away. I thought about how a hive goes still when a predator approaches, how the guard bees position themselves at the entrance, antenna raised, reading the air for chemical signals of danger. Brandon reeked of it. Not just the cologne. Something underneath. Sour. Metallic. The smell of a man who has run out of time. I tried to focus on Pastor Hayes. On the scripture. On saying goodbye to the woman I had loved for 36 years. But I kept getting pulled back to the man sitting beside me, to the way his fingers drummed against his thigh in a pattern that had nothing to do with hymns, to the way Cynthia would not look at the casket. When the service ended, we drove the procession to Green Hills Cemetery. It sat on a wooded hillside on the north edge of town, old graves mixing with new ones under a canopy of oaks and dogwoods. Eleanor's plot was beneath the dogwood tree she had chosen 20 years ago, right next to her mother. She had shown me the spot on a Sunday walk years before, casual as pointing out a good restaurant. "That is where I want to be, Frank. Under the dogwood. It blooms white. Every April." I had laughed. "You are 40 years old, Eleanor. We have time." She had looked at me with those brown eyes. "You never know, sweetheart. You just never know." The casket was lowered slowly, ropes creaking, earth waiting. I stood at the edge and watched the white roses disappear into the ground. Jerry's hand on my shoulder. Pastor Hayes, reading the final words. "Dust to dust. Ashes to ashes." I looked up once during the committal. Brandon was checking his Rolex again. Cynthia was typing something on her phone, her thumbs moving fast, her face hidden behind those ridiculous sunglasses. Their mother was being lowered into the earth, and they could not even watch. Something cold settled in my chest. Not grief. I had felt grief. This was different. This was the first hairline crack in the foundation of everything I believed about my daughter. The first fracture I should have caught years ago. I had heard Psalm 23 at a dozen funerals. It never meant anything personal, until I watched them lower my wife into the ground beneath the dogwood tree she had chosen when she was 40. The tree that bloomed white every April. White for hope, white for beginnings, white for the woman who believed in both, even when the world gave her no reason to. After the burial, The congregation moved to the fellowship hall in the basement of the church. A large room with folding tables and metal chairs and fluorescent lights that buzzed like confused bees. The ladies' auxiliary had been cooking since dawn. Long tables covered with white cloths held enough food to feed half of Buncombe County. Biscuits and gravy in cast-iron skillets, still warm from the oven. Country ham sliced thin and salty. Fried apple pies dusted with cinnamon sugar. Green bean casserole with those crispy onion strings on top. Cornbread baked in squares. Sweet potato pie with peaks of meringue browned just right. Deviled eggs arranged on pressed glass plates that had probably seen every funeral in this church for the past 40 years. Sweet tea in giant glass dispensers. The kind that sweats in any weather. The smells of my childhood. The tastes of comfort. Food that said home, that said family, that said these mountains and the people who lived in them. Eleanor had contributed to 100 of these spreads over the years. Her blackberry cobbler was famous. She made it with berries she picked herself along the creek behind our property, and she never once wrote down the recipe. Said it lived in her hands, not on paper. Now her hands were still. The recipe was gone. I sat in a folding chair near the corner, accepting condolences. Mrs. Dalton from the next farm squeezed both my hands. She was the best of us, Frank. The very best. Tom Creighton, who ran the hardware store on Lexington Avenue, nodded and gripped my shoulder. Whatever you need. Anytime. Pastor Hayes leaned close. We are here for you, Frank. The church is here for you. I nodded. Shook hands. Said thank you until the words became sounds without meaning. I held a plate of food I could not eat. The biscuit crumbled untouched. The sweet tea went warm. What most people did not know about me was that my hearing was exceptional. 25 years of bridge inspection had trained my ears to detect the faintest anomaly in structural integrity. The ping of a cable under stress, the groan of steel bending beyond tolerance, the whisper of concrete cracking where it should not crack. I could hear things other people missed. Eleanor used to joke that I had ears like a bat and the social skills to match. That gift, if you could call it that, is what saved my life. Cynthia and Brandon stood near the dessert table, maybe 15 feet from my corner. Their backs were to me. To anyone watching, they looked like a grieving daughter leaning into her supportive husband, a private moment of shared sorrow. But I could hear every word. So when can we get into the accounts? Brandon's voice was low, urgent, barely above a whisper. His fingers were wrapped around a paper cup of sweet tea, so tight the cup was buckling. Not until probate. Cynthia's voice was flat, controlled. The lawyer said it could take weeks. We do not have weeks. Brandon grabbed her elbow. I saw it from across the room, his fingers digging in hard enough to make her wince. The same spot where I had noticed a fading bruise at the funeral. Ricky called again this morning. 300,000 by Friday. He is done waiting, Cynthia. He does not negotiate. He does not do extensions. Lower your voice. She pulled her arm free. People are watching. I turned my head slowly, pretending to examine a flower arrangement on the table beside me. White lilies. Someone had tied a ribbon around the vase. In loving memory, but my ears stayed locked on their conversation. Every syllable. Every breath between words. The retirement account, Cynthia continued. Mom's fund from Grandpa's farm. That is 340,000, plus the life insurance through her work. That is 2.5 million. We cannot touch any of it until probate, Brandon hissed. Which takes months. And the house, the farm, the equipment, all tied up in the estate. Then we go through Dad. Cynthia's voice dropped even lower. Power of attorney. He is a mess right now. Confused. Barely functioning. We get him to sign over financial control, and we access everything directly. He will not sign. He is stubborn. Brandon was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice so cold it did not sound human, Everyone signs eventually. You just have to find the right leverage. I sat very still. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. The ladies' auxiliary laughed about something in the kitchen. Normal sounds. Ordinary afternoon. And my daughter was standing 15 feet away, planning to steal everything Eleanor and I had built together. $300,000. That was not credit card debt. That was not a mortgage shortfall. That was the kind of money that came with threats. The kind that came with men named Ricky who called at 6 in the morning and did not negotiate. Through my peripheral vision, I watched them. Brandon's face was flushed red, creeping up from his collar. His hands clenched and unclenched in a rhythm that had nothing to do with grief. Cynthia's jaw was set hard, her fingers white-knuckled around that paper cup. I had seen that look before. On construction sites, when a foreman realized the foundation was cracked and the building was going up anyway, the look of people who had passed the point of no return. I stood slowly, using the table for support more than I needed to. Let them see. A tired old man. A beekeeper. With no sting left. I carried my untouched plate to the trash, nodded at a few more people, shook a few more hands, moved toward the exit like a man sleepwalking through his own grief. In the parking lot, the October air hit my face. Cool, clean. Smelling of wood smoke and fallen leaves. I climbed into my Ford pickup. The cracked vinyl seat. The faint smell of honey that never left this truck no matter how many times I cleaned it. Eleanor's scent baked into the fabric after 1,000 Saturday market trips. My hands gripped the steering wheel. They were not shaking from grief. They were shaking from something older. Harder. Rage. The kind that starts in your gut and climbs up your spine and settles behind your eyes like heat before a storm. My phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. A number I did not recognize. Local area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had just buried my wife and discovered my daughter was circling like a vulture. But something in my gut, the same instinct that had once made me pull a crew off a bridge 6 minutes before a support cable snapped, told me to answer. I pressed the green button. Frank? The voice was female. Tight. Shaking. Frank, this is Patricia Langford, Eleanor's friend from the university. I need to see you right now. Not tomorrow. Not later. Right now, Patricia. Eleanor's closest friend. Chemistry professor at UNC Asheville. They had lunch together every Wednesday for 20 years. What is wrong? A long pause. I could hear her breathing. Could hear the effort it took to form the next sentence. There is something in the honey, Frank. Something that should not be there. Eleanor sent me a jar 2 weeks before she passed. Asked me to test it. I finally got the results back from the lab today. My blood went cold. The parking lot blurred. What did you find? Another pause. Longer this time. Frank, do not bring anyone with you. Not your daughter. Not her husband. Come alone. And Frank, the jar. It had your daughter's handwriting on the label. I drove across Asheville with my hands locked on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The way they taught us in defensive driving. The way you hold on when the road is about to give out underneath you. Patricia Langford lived on the north side of town, in a modest brick house 3 blocks from the UNC Asheville campus. She had been Eleanor's closest friend for 20 years. Every Wednesday, without exception, the two of them met for lunch at the corner kitchen on Biltmore Avenue. Soup and salad and conversation that could stretch past 2 hours. Patricia was the kind of woman Eleanor gravitated toward. Thoughtful, precise, a woman who dealt in facts, not feelings. Though she had plenty of both. I parked in her driveway behind a green Subaru with a faculty parking sticker on the windshield. The porch light was on despite it being mid-afternoon. The door opened before I reached the steps. Patricia stood in the doorway. And the first thing I noticed was her hands. They were shaking. Not the slight tremor of nerves. A deep, uncontrollable shake that made the papers she was holding rustle like dry leaves. Come in, she said. Her voice was thin, She looked like she had not slept. Her kitchen table was covered in paperwork. Lab reports, printouts from chemical databases, a yellow legal pad filled with handwritten notes, and in the center of it all, sealed inside a plastic zip bag, was a glass jar of honey. Mercer Farm Honey, Asheville, NC. Written in small, precise handwriting I recognized immediately. Cynthia's hand. The same lettering she used on every jar she brought to Eleanor. Below the farm name, in slightly larger script, from Cynthia's harvest. October batch. I stared at the jar. The honey inside was dark amber, almost brown. Our wildflower honey was usually lighter than that. Golden, not brown. I had not noticed the difference before. Eleanor might have. Eleanor noticed everything. Patricia sat down across from me. She placed her hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. It did not work. Eleanor sent me this jar 2 weeks before she passed, she said. Along with a letter. She asked me to run a chemical analysis on it. She said she could not explain why. Only that something tasted wrong, and she needed to know what it was. Patricia pushed a single sheet of paper toward me. The letterhead read, Department of Chemistry, University of North Carolina, at Asheville. Below it, columns of numbers and chemical names that meant nothing to me, but Patricia had circled one line in red marker, thick red ink. The kind of mark a teacher makes when something is critically, dangerously wrong. Ethylene glycol, she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. It is the primary component in automotive antifreeze. Colorless, odorless, when diluted. And here is the part that matters, frank. It is sweet. Naturally sweet. When you dissolve it in honey, you cannot taste the difference. The honey masks it completely. The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. Could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street. Normal sounds from a world that had just stopped making sense. How does it work? I asked. My voice came out flat. Like I was asking about a blueprint specification, not the murder of my wife. Patricia opened a folder. Her hands steadied slightly as she moved into the familiar territory of science. In small doses over an extended period, ethylene glycol is metabolized by the liver into glycolic acid and oxalic acid. These acids accumulate in the kidneys. They form crystals, tiny calcium oxalate crystals that clog the renal tubules, destroying kidney function gradually. She paused. The progression mimics chronic kidney disease almost perfectly. Fatigue, nausea, confusion, loss of appetite, weight loss. By the time acute failure occurs, the damage is irreversible. And the cause of death on the certificate reads exactly what Eleanor's read. Acute kidney failure secondary to chronic renal disease. Natural causes. That is what everyone would think. Patricia said quietly. That is what the doctors at Mission Hospital thought. That is what I would have thought if Eleanor had not sent me this jar. She pulled out another plastic bag. Inside was a handwritten letter on Eleanor's personal stationery. The cream-colored paper she used for important correspondence. Her handwriting was shakier than I remembered. Some letters were misformed. The pen had pressed too hard in places, leaving indentations that went through to the other side. Read it, Patricia said. I picked up the bag, held it under the kitchen light. Dear Patricia, I am writing this because I do not know who else to trust. Something is wrong with the honey. I have been getting sicker, and my doctor says it is my kidneys, but I know my body. This is not natural. The honey Cynthia brings tastes different from what Frank and I harvest ourselves. Sweeter. Almost chemical. I know that sounds crazy. I pray I am wrong. I pray my own daughter is not doing what I think she is doing. But if anything happens to me, test this jar. Please. And if I am right, tell Frank. Tell him I am sorry I did not say anything sooner. I was trying to protect him from the truth about our girl. I love him. I have always loved him. Eleanor. I set the letter down. The words blurred. I realized I was crying. Not the quiet tears of the funeral. Something deeper. Something that came from a place I did not know existed. The place where a man keeps the things he cannot survive knowing. She knew. I whispered. She suspected. Patricia said gently. She did not want to believe it. No mother wants to believe her own daughter is capable of something like this. But she sent you the jar. Yes. Because she was Eleanor. Because even when her heart was breaking, she documented the evidence. She built a case, the same way she organized a library. Carefully, methodically, with the understanding that someone would need to find it later. I looked at the jar again. At Cynthia's handwriting on the label. My daughter's handwriting. On the jar that killed her mother. The honey my daughter harvested from the hives I built on the farm where Eleanor and I raised her. The sweetest thing on our property turned into a weapon. The most innocent gesture, a daughter bringing honey to her mother, turned into a 6-month murder. I sat in Patricia's kitchen and felt the world tilt sideways. Everything I had built, every structure I had ever trusted, every load-bearing wall in my life, cracked at the same moment. The bridge collapsed, and I was standing in the middle of it. How much antifreeze was in the honey? I asked. Enough. Approximately 30 to 40 milliliters per jar. At 1 tablespoon of honey per day in her tea, Eleanor was ingesting roughly 2 to 3 milliliters of ethylene glycol daily. Sublethol individually, but cumulative. Over 6 months, the damage would have been catastrophic and irreversible. 6 months. Every Sunday, every jar, every tablespoon in her morning tea, in that reading room she called her sanctuary. Frank, Patricia said carefully, there is something else. I did not just test the honey. I contacted a colleague in toxicology at Duke. Sent him the data, anonymously. He said this level of precision, this specific dosage calibrated to cause gradual renal failure without triggering acute symptoms, this is not something a layperson could calculate. This requires pharmaceutical knowledge, specific training in pharmacokinetics. Brandon was a pharmacist, I said. Patricia nodded. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. I stared at the jar with my daughter's handwriting, at Eleanor's letter written in a hand that shook because her kidneys were already failing, at the red circle around the word ethylene glycol, and I understood that my wife had been murdered slowly, deliberately, sweetly, 1 tablespoon at a time, by the people she trusted most. My daughter's handwriting, on the jar that killed her mother. I sat in Patricia's kitchen and felt the world tilt sideways. Patricia did not let me drive home. She drove me straight to the Asheville Federal Building on Patton Avenue. A gray concrete structure that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed beauty was a security risk. She had called ahead. Someone was waiting. The elevator took us to the 4th floor. A woman stepped out of the last office on the left. Maybe 40. Dark hair pulled back tight. Gray suit. No jewelry, except a functional watch. Her eyes missed nothing. The eyes of someone who cataloged every detail in a room the way Eleanor cataloged books. Mr. Mercer. I am Special Agent Diana Reeves, FBI, Financial Crimes and Fraud Division. She shook my hand. Firm, brief. I am sorry about your wife. Please, sit down. Her office was small and organized. 2 monitors. A filing cabinet. No personal touches. Just work. Patricia squeezed my arm before the door closed. Eleanor would want you to be strong, Frank. Agent Reeves opened a folder already 2 inches thick. She did not waste time. Mr. Mercer, we have been investigating Brandon Blake for 11 months. Not for murder. For fraud. She turned the folder toward me. Brandon Blake. Age 38. Former pharmacist, terminated from CVS Charlotte for theft of controlled substances. License revoked. She flipped the page. In 2020, Blake partnered with an individual named Ricky Salerno to establish Pure Path Wellness, an online supplement company. The FDA opened an investigation in 2023. Unverified health claims, mislabeled ingredients, products containing undisclosed pharmaceutical compounds. She looked at me. When Professor Langford contacted us with the toxicology results, the murder of your wife became part of our existing investigation. Murder. The words sat between us like a loaded weapon. Reeves pulled out bank statements. Highlighted lines in yellow and red. Over the past 2 years, $520,000 has been transferred out of your wife's retirement account. The account funded by the sale of her father's farm in Tennessee. Eleanor's rainy day money. Every dollar Arthur Whitley's land had earned. The authorization forms bear your wife's signature, Reeves continued. But forensic analysis confirms they are forgeries. The handwriting matches your daughter's. $520,000. Stolen from the most careful woman I had ever known by her own daughter copying her signature. There is more. 8 weeks before her death, Eleanor retained an attorney named Howard Gentry in downtown Asheville. She was preparing criminal charges against Cynthia. Embezzlement. Fraud. Forgery. Eleanor had found out. Traced the theft. Hired a lawyer. Was going to press charges against her own daughter. And she never told me. She was also changing her will, Reeves added. Removing Cynthia entirely. The new will names you as sole heir and designates a charitable trust for the Asheville Public Library reading program. Even while being poisoned by her own daughter, Eleanor was thinking about those children in the library. About the legacy that mattered. One more thing. Reeves leaned forward. Eleanor's employer held a group life insurance policy. As head librarian with 28 years of service, she was covered for $2.5 million. You are the primary beneficiary. Cynthia is secondary. If you pass away or are declared legally incompetent, your daughter inherits everything. $2.5 million. Enough to pay Ricky Salerno. Enough to cover the FDA fines. Enough to disappear. Reeves closed the folder. They poisoned her over 6 months using a compound Brandon Blake knew would mimic natural kidney failure. And based on that insurance policy, based on what I am hearing about power of attorney, you are next. The room was very quiet. I could hear traffic on Patton Avenue 4 stories below. Could hear my own heartbeat louder than it should have been. What do you need from me? Reeves reached into her desk drawer and pulled out 2 objects. The first was a miniature camera mounted inside a standard picture frame. Dark wood. Generic family photo behind the glass. The kind of frame that sits on a mantelpiece for years and nobody ever really looks at. This replaces any existing frame in your home, she said. Wide-angle lens. Audio and video. Transmits directly to our surveillance unit. The second was a microphone, flat and black. No bigger than a dime. This fits inside the lining of a hat. My beekeeper's hat, I said. She almost smiled. Perfect. No one questions an old beekeeper wearing his hat. She placed both devices on the desk. We will have agents in a surveillance van within range of your property at all times. If you feel your life is in immediate danger, say the phrase Eleanor's gardenias in any conversation. We come in immediately. And if they find the camera, then you are a grieving widower who bought a new picture frame to cope with loss. Play confused. Lean into the grief. They already think you are falling apart. Let them keep thinking that. I picked up the frame. Light. Ordinary. The kind of thing nobody looks at twice. I spent 25 years reading blueprints, I said. I know how to inspect a structure without anyone knowing I am looking. I do not doubt that. But remember, this is not a bridge inspection. This is a crime scene. And the people who cracked it look like your family. I drove home as the sun set behind the Blue Ridge. The sky turned the color of a bruise. Purple and orange and deep red. The kind of sunset Eleanor would have made me pull over to watch. The camera frame sat on the passenger seat. The microphone was already sewn into my beekeeper's hat in the back seat. I was 60 years old, driving home to become bait in my own house. The last time I had felt this kind of fear was standing on a bridge I had designed, watching it sway in a hurricane, praying the math was right. The cables held that day. The structure survived. This time, the math was about my life, and I was not sure the cables would hold. Before I walked into a house that was no longer safe, I did what any engineer would do. I checked the blueprints. Eleanor's blueprints were hidden in the one place nobody would ever think to look. I got home after dark. The farm was quiet. 40 hives silent under the October stars. I set the camera frame on the mantelpiece first, removed our wedding photo from the old frame, slid it into the new one. The lens was invisible behind the glass. A tiny red light blinked once when I plugged in the power cord. Then, it went dark. Recording. Watching. Waiting. The beekeeper's hat went on its hook by the back door. The microphone sewn into the lining. Just an old hat stained with propolis and sweat. Nothing worth a second glance. Then I went to Eleanor's reading room. The room was small. A window facing east for morning light. An armchair with a reading lamp. Her teacup still sat on the side table, unwashed. A faint ring of honey dried at the bottom. Her reading glasses lay folded beside it. A mystery novel face down on the arm of the chair, spine cracked to hold her place. She always loved mysteries. Said there was comfort in knowing the truth would come out by the last chapter. And there in the corner stood the card catalog. Solid oak, 60 drawers, brass pulls tarnished with age. The library had been ready to throw it away when they went digital. Eleanor rescued it, spent a week cleaning it, oiling the wood, polishing the brass, filled the drawers with her own system. Not library cards. Something else entirely. I had never gone through it. It was Eleanor's private space. Some rooms in a marriage belong to one person, and you honor that without being asked. But Eleanor was gone, and she had left me a map. I knelt and pulled open the M drawer. Rows of index cards filed with librarian precision. Near the back, a tab I had never seen. Mercer. E.L. Restricted. Behind it was a manila envelope, thick, sealed with tape. Eleanor had written on the front, "For Frank, if needed. I pray, it is never needed." Inside was a composition notebook, black and white marbled cover. Eleanor's handwriting filled the pages, but smaller than I knew. Shakier. Written by a hand, losing its steadiness. January 8th. Honey from Cynthia's jar tastes metallic today. Stomach cramps within 2 hours. Frank's honey from the same harvest tastes normal. Only Cynthia's jar. January 22nd. Nauseous again after morning tea. Only on days I use Cynthia's honey. Switched to Frank's jar for 3 days. Felt fine. Went back to Cynthia's to test. Sick again within hours. This is not coincidence. February 3rd. Cynthia visited Sunday. Brought a new jar. Said she harvested it from the south pasture hives. I used it Monday morning. Dizzy by noon. Could not remember my passwords at work. February 14th. Valentine's Day. Cynthia brought a special jar with a red ribbon. I used extra in my tea. Double sick today. Could not get out of bed until 3 in the afternoon. Frank thinks it is the flu. March 1st. I weigh 112 pounds. Lost 14 pounds since January. Dr. Henderson says my kidneys are showing stress. I did not tell him about the honey, because if I am right, then my daughter is poisoning me, and I am not ready to believe that. God, please, let me be wrong. March 15th. I am not wrong. Sent a sample to Patricia at the university. Asked her to test it. Also contacted attorney Howard Gentry. Filed preliminary paperwork, criminal charges against Cynthia, embezzlement, fraud, forgery, $520,000 from my retirement fund. I should have pressed charges the first time. When she took 180,000 2 years ago, I forgave her then. Used Daddy's farm money to cover it because I believed her when she cried. I will not make that mistake again. This is me loving my daughter enough to teach her consequences. The entries continued through March and into April. Eleanor documenting every symptom with librarian precision. Dates, times, which jar, how much honey, how long until symptoms appeared. Building a case the way she built everything. Carefully, methodically. The last entry was dated October 3rd, 3 days before she collapsed. The handwriting was barely legible. Letters sliding off the lines. October 3rd. If you are reading this, Frank, it means I did not make it. I am sorry I did not tell you. I wanted to protect you from the truth about our girl. You loved her so much. You always saw the best in her even when I could not. Forgive me for carrying this alone. Check the honey. The card catalog has everything. Tell Patricia. And Frank. I love you. I have loved you since that Saturday in June, when you stood at the altar looking terrified. And I thought that is the most honest man I have ever seen. I love you. Always. Eleanor. I closed the notebook, pressed it against my chest, and I sat on the floor of Eleanor's reading room and cried the way I had not cried since she passed. Not the hollow grief of the hospital, not the numb stillness of the funeral. Something deeper. The sound a man makes when he discovers the woman he failed to protect had been protecting him all along. She knew. For months, she knew. And instead of telling me, instead of falling apart, she documented everything, built the case, sent the evidence, wrote the letter, because that was Eleanor. Even dying, she was the most organized person in any room. I do not know how long I sat there. The clock in the hallway ticked. The house settled with its old creaks. Eleanor used to say, "Old houses talk if you listen." Tonight her house was saying something I could barely stand to hear. Then headlights swept across the window, tires on gravel, engine cutting off, 2 car doors, voices low and urgent, footsteps on the porch. I moved fast. Notebook back in the envelope behind the tab, drawer closed, lamp off, face wiped. The front door opened. No knock, just a key turning. Eleanor had given Cynthia a spare years ago, for emergencies. "Daddy?" Cynthia's voice in the dark hallway. "We were worried about you." Behind her, Brandon's heavier footsteps. The chemical cloud of his cologne reaching me before he did. They were carrying suitcases. They were moving in. The wolves had come to the hive. They moved in like they owned the place. Suitcases in the hallway. Brandon's cologne filling every room like a chemical occupation. Cynthia rearranging Eleanor's kitchen like her mother had never existed. I stood in the doorway that first morning and watched my daughter open cabinets. Eleanor had organized over 36 years. The spice rack Eleanor had built from reclaimed barnwood. The mason jars she had labeled in her careful script. Cinnamon, cardamom, turmeric, cloves. Cynthia moved them without looking at the labels, shoved them to the back of the shelf to make room for protein powder and energy bars Brandon had carried in from the SUV. Eleanor's cast iron skillet, the one her mother had given her, the one seasoned with 40 years of cornbread and Sunday breakfasts, was sitting in the sink full of soapy water. Eleanor never put soap on cast iron. She would have lost her mind. I said nothing. I shuffled to the kitchen table in my slippers, moving slower than I needed to. Let my shoulders slump. Let my mouth hang slightly open. Let my eyes go soft and unfocused. The performance had begun. "Good morning, Daddy." Cynthia set a cup of coffee in front of me. Her voice was bright. Too bright. Like a fluorescent bulb in a room that needed candlelight. "Did you sleep okay?" I blinked at her, slowly. "Eleanor? Is that you?" Her smile faltered for half a second. "No, Daddy. It is Cynthia, your daughter." I stared at her like I was processing the information through fog. Cynthia. Right. I am sorry. I get confused in the mornings now. What day is it? It is Wednesday. I nodded vaguely. Picked up the coffee. Set it down. Picked it up again. Where is Eleanor? Is she at the library? The look that passed between Cynthia and Brandon was quick. A flicker of eye contact that carried an entire conversation. He raised his eyebrows. She gave the slightest nod. They thought I could not see it. They thought I was an old man dissolving into grief and confusion. They were wrong. I used to read blueprints for a living. I could spot a structural weakness before anyone else in the room. A hairline fracture in a support beam. A misaligned bolt. The subtle bow of a cable under stress that no one else noticed until it was too late. Now I was reading the blueprints of a murder plot, and every load-bearing wall was rotten. Dad, Cynthia said gently, sitting across from me. Mom passed away. Remember? Last week. We buried her at Green Hills. I let my face crumple. Let my chin tremble. Oh, yes. I forgot. I keep forgetting. Brandon leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me the way a contractor watches a condemned building, assessing how long before it falls on its own. He is worse than I thought, he muttered to Cynthia. Not quite quiet enough. She shot him a look. Not now. I sipped the coffee. It tasted fine. No bitterness. No metallic edge. They had not started with the coffee yet. They were saving the honey. After breakfast, I shuffled back to the guest bedroom where I had slept. Let them have the run of the house. Let them search. I could hear them moving through the rooms, drawers opening and closing. The creak of the floorboard near the hallway closet where Eleanor kept the filing cabinet. Brandon's voice, low and frustrated. Where does he keep the safe? I do not know. Cynthia. Check the bedroom closet. More footsteps. The master bedroom door opening. The sound of hangers scraping metal rods as someone pushed through Eleanor's clothes. Clothes that still smelled like her. Lavender and honey. And the particular warmth of a woman who had spent her life taking care of everyone around her. They searched for 2 hours. I heard them in every room. The kitchen, the bedroom, the office, the garage. Brandon even went to the honey barn, came back smelling like beeswax on top of his cologne, which was the worst combination of scents I had ever encountered. They did not touch the reading room. Or rather, they opened the door, looked inside, and moved on. I heard Brandon's voice dismissive and quick. Just books and old furniture. Nothing in here. The card catalog sat in its corner. 60 oak drawers. Brass pulls. A dead woman's evidence filed under restricted. And Brandon Blake walked right past it because he saw an antique instead of an arsenal. Around noon, I made my move. Shuffled out of the guest room, leaning on the doorframe like I needed it for balance. I am going to check on the bees, I announced to no one in particular. Cynthia appeared from the kitchen. Do you need help, Daddy? No. I just need some air. I need to talk to Eleanor's bees. The look she gave Brandon. The quick shake of his head. Let him go. He is losing it. I walked to the hives. Slowly. Stopped twice to look around. Like I had forgotten where I was going. But once I was past the tree line, out of sight of the house, I pulled out my phone and called Jerry. He answered on the second ring. How are you holding up? I need you to come to the farm. Not the house. The south pasture gate. Bring nothing. Tell no one. Jerry did not ask why. That was Jerry. He arrived in 20 minutes. I met him at the gate and handed him the manila envelope from the card catalog. Eleanor's notebook. The evidence. Keep this somewhere safe. Not your house. A safety deposit box. A lawyer's office. Somewhere they cannot find it. He looked at the envelope. Then at me. His face was tight but steady. How bad is it, Frank? They killed her, Jerry. My daughter and her husband poisoned Eleanor for 6 months with antifreeze in the honey. Now they are in my house going through her things. And they are planning to do the same to me." Jerry was quiet for a long moment. The mountain wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the hives, the bees hummed their steady, ancient song. "What do you need?" he asked. "Just keep that envelope safe. And if anything happens to me, take it to the FBI. Agent Diana Reeves, Asheville Federal Building." He gripped my shoulder. "Nothing is going to happen to you." I wish I believed that. I walked back to the house. Slow, confused. An old beekeeper returning from his hives with nothing but grief and fog. Cynthia met me at the door. "Did you have a nice walk, Daddy?" I smiled vaguely. "The bees miss Eleanor. They keep circling the empty frames. They know she is gone." Cynthia's face softened for one brief moment. Something human flickered behind her eyes. Then it vanished. "Come inside, Daddy. It is getting cold." Late afternoon, Brandon stepped onto the back porch to take a phone call. I was in the living room, pretending to doze in the armchair. The camera on the mantelpiece recorded everything, but I could hear him through the screen door. "Ricky, I told you Friday. We are working on it." A pause. His voice dropped lower, but not low enough. "No, do not come here. I will have the money. Just give me until Friday." Another pause. "Longer. I said I will have it. The old man is signing tomorrow. We have a lawyer coming. Once he signs the power of attorney, we access everything. The retirement, the insurance, all of it." He hung up, stood on the porch for a moment. I watched through half-closed eyes as he gripped the railing with both hands, knuckles white, head bowed. A desperate man, calculating his remaining options. A desperate man is a dangerous man. Bees know this instinctively. When a hornet enters the hive, the colony does not negotiate. It does not reason. It does not offer second chances. It surrounds the threat and eliminates it. I was not a bee, but I was learning. Night fell on the Blue Ridge like a curtain dropping over a stage. One moment the mountains were burning orange through the windows. The next, darkness. Complete. Heavy. The kind of darkness that only exists outside city limits, where the nearest streetlight is 3 miles away, and the only illumination comes from stars that do not care what happens beneath them. I had given up the master bedroom without being asked. Let Cynthia and Brandon take it. Let them sleep in the bed Eleanor and I had shared for 36 years. The bed where she had lain awake those final months, feeling her kidneys fail, knowing her daughter was responsible, writing in that notebook by the light of the bedside lamp. I had bought her for Christmas 12 years ago. I told them I preferred the living room couch. Closer to the bathroom, I said. Old man's bladder. They accepted it without question. Another sign of decline. Another brick in the wall of my performance. The couch was old. Eleanor had picked it out at a furniture store in Hendersonville when Cynthia was in middle school. Floral pattern. Soft cushions that had molded to our shapes over 2 decades. I lay there in the dark. On my back, hands folded on my chest, breathing the deep, slow rhythm of a man in exhausted sleep. The farmhouse was built in 1923. Wooden frame, plaster walls, original hardwood floors that creaked in predictable patterns. I knew every sound this house made. The tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the settling groan of the roof joists when the temperature dropped, the whisper of air through the gap under the back door that Eleanor had asked me to weather strip for 3 winters running. I also knew that sound traveled through these walls like water through tissue paper. Every word spoken above a whisper in the master bedroom carried straight to the living room. They were counting on me being asleep. They were wrong. The first hour was quiet. I heard water running, teeth being brushed, the creak of bed springs as they settled in. Normal sounds. Domestic sounds. The sounds of 2 people preparing for sleep in a dead woman's bed. Then the talking started. Cynthia's voice first. muffled but audible through the plaster. "Did you see him today?" He called me Eleanor. Twice. He forgot she was dead. Brandon's response was lower, harder to catch. I focused. Tuned out the clock. Tuned out the wind against the windows. Tuned my ears the way I used to tune them on bridge inspections, listening for the one sound that did not belong. "Perfect," Brandon said. "Dementia. Grief-induced cognitive decline. No court in the country would deny a power of attorney petition for a man who cannot remember his own wife is dead." A pause. Springs creaking as someone shifted position. "Vernon will be here at 9 tomorrow morning," Cynthia said. 3 documents. Power of attorney. Quitclaim deed for the farm. Healthcare directive. Once he signs, we control everything. And if he will not sign, he will sign. He does not even know what day it is. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear Brandon breathing. Slow, deliberate. The breathing of a man choosing his next words carefully. "And after he signs?" Silence from Cynthia. Brandon continued. His voice dropped, but the walls carried every syllable like a confession delivered directly to my ears. "Old beekeepers fall downstairs, Cynthia. They get stung one too many times, wander off into the woods, and do not come back. Nobody investigates an old man dying on his own farm." My hands clenched under the blanket. My jaw locked. Every muscle in my body went rigid. But I kept my breathing steady. In through the nose, out through barely parted lips. The rhythm of deep sleep. The rhythm of a man who had no idea his daughter was discussing his murder 15 feet away through a plaster wall. Cynthia's voice came back. Thin. Uncertain. "What do you mean exactly?" "I mean, after he signs the papers, we handle the rest. Make it look natural. A grieving widower alone on a farm. People will understand. They will say he died of a broken heart." Brandon said it like he was reading a grocery list. Like my death was an item to check off between buying milk and paying the electric bill. Cynthia did not object. Did not say stop. Did not say that is my father. She just asked one question. When? Soon. After the signing. Maybe that night. Maybe the next morning. Depends on how it plays out. Then footsteps. Someone getting up. Coming down the hallway. I closed my eyes harder. Forced every muscle slack. The footsteps stopped outside the living room. I could feel the presence in the doorway. Someone standing there. Watching. Evaluating. He is asleep. Cynthia's whisper. Barely a breath. Keep him that way. Brandon's voice from the bedroom. We need him rested for tomorrow. Alert enough to hold a pen. The presence lingered for 3 more seconds. Then retreated. Footsteps back down the hall. Door closing. Bed springs. Silence. I lay there and let the rage fill me like hot water filling a bathtub. From my feet, to my chest, to my throat, to the backs of my eyes. My own daughter. Standing in my doorway, making sure I was asleep so her husband could plan my death without interruption. Eleanor had warned me. 5 years ago in this very house. There is something wrong about that man. I can feel it. I had told her she was imagining things. I slid the burner phone from under the couch cushion. The screen lit up the ceiling for a second before I cupped my hand over it. I typed with my thumbs, slow and careful in the darkness. They are planning for tomorrow. Overheard accident discussion. They want me to sign power of attorney in the morning, then stage my death. Brandon said old beekeepers fall downstairs. Need to move fast. Agent Reeves responded within 45 seconds. Hold position. Camera in the frame is recording. We have audio. Lawyer arrives 9 a.m. Let them believe they are winning. We need the confession on camera. Stay alive, Mr. Mercer. Sunrise is 6 hours away. 6 hours. I had to survive 6 more hours in a house with 2 people who had already killed once and were calculating when to kill again. I put the phone back under the cushion, stared at the ceiling. The fan turned slow circles in the darkness. Eleanor had picked that fan out at a hardware store in Black Mountain. "It is quiet," she had said. Like a whisper, I counted the rotations. It was the only thing I could control. The only rhythm that belonged to me in a house that no longer felt like home. 212. 213. 214. Somewhere in the master bedroom, in the bed where Eleanor had dreamed her last dreams, my daughter slept soundly, planning tomorrow, planning my death. 347. 348. 349. The fan whispered. The clock ticked. The bees outside were silent, and I waited for dawn, the way a condemned man waits for the governor's call. 6 hours. I counted every minute. Morning light crept across the Blue Ridge like it was afraid of what it would find. I watched it through the living room window. A thin gold line tracing the ridgeline, catching the frost on the pasture grass. The fan above me had made 1,047 rotations since I stopped counting at 349 and started again. I had not slept. Not 1 minute. The house stirred. Water running in the bathroom. The coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen. Eleanor's coffee maker. The one she had bought at the Williams-Sonoma outlet in Weaverville because she said life was too short for bad coffee. I heard Cynthia moving around. Cabinet doors. The clink of ceramic. The refrigerator opening and closing. I sat up slowly. Made a show of groaning. Rubbed my face. Shuffled to the bathroom with the deliberate unsteadiness of a man whose body and mind were both failing. Splashed water on my face. Looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked older than 60. Looked like someone whose foundation had cracked. Good. Let them see that man. I shuffled into the kitchen. Cynthia stood at the counter in Eleanor's apron. The blue one with the yellow sunflowers that Eleanor had worn every Sunday morning for 15 years. Seeing my daughter wearing it made something hot and sharp rise in my throat. I swallowed it down. "Good morning, Daddy." Cynthia turned with a smile so bright it could have powered the whole farmhouse. "Did you get any rest?" "Some," I said. My voice thin, scratchy. Not entirely performance. 6 hours of silent terror will do that to a voice. She set a tray on the kitchen table. Coffee in Eleanor's favorite mug, the blue one from Weaverville with the chip on the rim I had never fixed. Scrambled eggs. Toast with butter. A small glass of orange juice. And there, beside the plate, catching the morning light through the window, a jar of honey. I stared at it. The glass jar was about 8 ounces. Wildflower honey. Dark amber. Almost brown. Too dark. The same shade Patricia had shown me in her kitchen. And on the front, in small, precise handwriting, I would recognize anywhere, a label from Cynthia's harvest. November batch. November. Eleanor was already dead in November. Cynthia had not harvested this honey from our hives. She had prepared it somewhere else. Added something to it. Something sweet and colorless that would dissolve without a trace. "I made it fresh," Cynthia said. She watched me the way a cat watches a mouse it has already cornered. "From your own hives, Daddy. The South pasture ones. I know Mom always used your honey in her tea, so I thought you might like some with breakfast." My hand reached for the jar. Steady. Calm. I unscrewed the lid, brought it close to my face, and inhaled. Honey. Clover. Wildflower. And underneath? So faint it was almost nothing. A sweetness that did not belong. Chemical. Artificial. The ghost of ethylene glycol hiding behind 10,000 flowers. "This is very thoughtful, sweetheart," I said. Poured a generous amount into the coffee. Stirred it with the spoon. Brought the mug to my lips. Cynthia watched. Her eyes tracked the mug from the table to my mouth. Waiting. I paused. Set the mug down. Patted my shirt pocket. My reading glasses. I left them in the living room. Let me get them. Of course. Take your time. Drink your coffee while it is hot. I shuffled out. Took the mug with me. Old man habit. Carry your coffee. Everywhere. In the living room, I moved to the window where Eleanor's potted ferns sat on the sill. The one she had kept alive for 14 years through sheer stubborn devotion. She talked to that fern. Told it about her day. Said plants grew better when someone paid attention to them. I poured the entire cup of coffee into the soil. The dark liquid disappeared into the earth. Then I went back to the kitchen, took the honey jar, and in the bathroom with the door locked, carefully poured a sample into a small glass vial I had taken from Eleanor's medicine cabinet. Evidence. I sealed it, wrapped it in tissue, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Back in the kitchen, I refilled the mug with plain water from the tap, added a drop of coffee from the pot so it would smell right. Returned to the table and sipped. Eleanor had done this exact thing. I knew it from her journal. March entry. Cynthia brought a new jar Sunday. Dumped the honey into the gardenias when she was not looking. Something about it did not smell right. Eleanor's gardenias had died 2 weeks later. Sudden wilt. No explanation. This fern would be dead by tomorrow. But I would not be. Cynthia cleared the dishes. Humming. Actually humming. While she washed Eleanor's plates in Eleanor's sink with Eleanor's dish soap. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled vaguely and asked what day it was again. At 8:55. I shuffled to the living room. Brandon was already there, pacing near the front window, watching the driveway. His Rolex caught the morning light. The expensive watch of a man who owed $300,000 by Friday. He wore a polo shirt with the collar popped. Fresh cologne applied so heavily it preceded him into rooms by a full 3 seconds. Cynthia appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on Eleanor's sunflower apron. Vernon will be here any minute, Daddy. He is a friend of Brandon's, a lawyer. He is going to help us sort out the estate paperwork. Very routine. I nodded slowly. Like a man processing simple information through heavy fog. At 9 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. Vernon Cross looked precisely like what he was. A lawyer who had traded ethics for income somewhere around his second bankruptcy. Mid-50s. Thinning hair combed over a scalp that had given up the fight. A suit that was expensive but did not fit right. As if he had bought it for a version of himself that no longer existed. A leather briefcase scuffed at the corners. And a smile. Wide. Practiced. The smile of a man who had convinced many confused people to sign documents they did not understand. Mr. Mercer. He extended his hand. His grip was too firm, too long, the handshake of a man performing confidence. I am Vernon Cross. I am here to simplify your life. Come in, I said. Shook his hand weakly. Let my fingers feel limp and uncertain in his grip. They positioned themselves around me with practiced efficiency. Cynthia on my left, Brandon on my right. Vernon in Eleanor's reading chair, the one she sat in every evening with her tea and her book. Seeing him in that chair, spreading his briefcase across the side table where Eleanor's teacup had sat, made my jaw clench so hard I felt a molar crack. But I kept my face vacant, kept my eyes soft, kept my hands trembling. Now, Mr. Mercer, Vernon began, clicking open the briefcase. I understand you have recently suffered a terrible loss. My condolences. Thank you. In times like these, legal matters can seem overwhelming. That is why I am here. To make this as painless as possible. He was smooth. I would give him that. The way he made theft sound like a public service. The way he made fraud sound like estate planning. The last man who tried to simplify my life was an engineer who cut corners on a bridge support beam in Haywood County. Saved the county $12,000. That bridge collapsed 3 months later during a school bus crossing. Nobody was killed because I had flagged the beam in my inspection report and they rerouted traffic the week before. I rebuilt that bridge. Took 8 months. Every beam tested. Every cable measured. Every bolt torque to specification. I was about to rebuild something else. The kitchen table was white oak. I built it myself in 2004. The summer, Cynthia turned 14. Eleanor picked the wood from a fallen tree behind the south pasture, and I spent 3 weekends planing it, joining the boards with butterfly keys, small bouties of walnut, set into the grain to hold the cracks together. Eleanor said the table looked like it had scars that someone loved enough to repair. She was right. That table held 20 years of Sunday breakfasts, tax returns, birthday cakes, and one Thanksgiving when the turkey caught fire, and we ate cornbread with cranberry sauce on paper plates, laughing until our ribs ached. Now Vernon Cross sat at the head of it, my wife's chair. He placed his briefcase flat on the surface, clicked both latches with his thumbs, and removed 3 documents. Each was clipped with a blue binder tab. He arranged them left to right, precise as surgical instruments. "Mr. Mercer," he said, folding his hands, "I understand this is a difficult time, but your daughter has asked me to help simplify the estate process. These 3 documents will protect everyone involved." I looked at Cynthia. She stood by the refrigerator, arms crossed, chin slightly lifted. Brandon leaned against the counter near the back door, arms folded, one ankle over the other. His Rolex caught the overhead light. Neither of them sat down. They were positioned like sentries, one at each exit. Vernon tapped the first document. "This is a durable power of attorney. It grants Cynthia authority to manage your financial accounts, property transactions, and medical decisions in the event you become, and I use this term loosely, incapacitated." He tapped the second. "This is a quitclaim deed, transferring ownership of the farm, the house, and all structures on the 62-acre parcel to a family trust. Cynthia would serve as trustee." He tapped the third. "And this is a healthcare directive. It designates Cynthia as your primary healthcare proxy, with full authority over medical interventions, including end-of-life care." I stared at the 3 documents. Blue tabs, white paper, black ink. Everything clean and professional, the way a trapdoor looks before you step on it. Vernon produced a silver pen from his jacket pocket and placed it parallel to the first document. "If you could sign here, here, and here." He pointed to yellow adhesive arrows on each page. "We can file by end of week." I picked up the pen. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of pen a man buys to make other men feel smaller. I turned it between my fingers, the way I used to turn a torque wrench, feeling its balance. "Vernon," I said slowly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Who called you?" He blinked. "I'm sorry? Who contacted you first? Cynthia or Brandon?" Vernon glanced toward the refrigerator. Cynthia uncrossed her arms. Brandon shifted his weight off the counter. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the old Frigidaire and the faint drone of bees from the south pasture, carrying through the cracked window. "Your daughter reached out to me last week," Vernon said carefully. "She was concerned about your well-being." "Last week," I repeated. "Eleanor's been dead 12 days. The will hasn't entered probate. No judge has reviewed any claim. And you're already here with 3 documents that give my daughter control of everything I own, everything I've built, and every medical decision about my body." I set the pen down, including when to pull the plug. Vernon's smile tightened. "Not much, just a millimeter at the corners, the kind of shift you notice only if you've spent decades reading the micro-expressions of contractors who are about to lie about concrete psi ratings. Mr. Mercer, I assure you this is standard estate planning. Standard." I let the word sit. "Let me tell you what I know about standard, Vernon. I spent 25 years inspecting bridges. You know what kills a bridge? Not the big things. Not earthquakes or floods. It's the small things, hairline cracks in the steel, corrosion in the cables nobody checks, bolts that loosen a quarter turn every year until the whole span drops into the river. Bridges don't collapse because of storms. They collapse because someone stopped paying attention." I leaned forward. "I have been paying attention." Cynthia stepped away from the refrigerator. "Daddy, you're confused. You haven't slept. You're grieving. We're trying to help. Help. I looked at her. My daughter, 33 years old, 6 pounds, 11 ounces, the day she was born. Eleanor counted her fingers 3 times because she couldn't believe anything that perfect could be real. I remembered Cynthia at 7, standing in the apiary in Eleanor's oversized veil, whispering to the bees. I remembered her at 16, crying on this very table because a boy named Travis broke her heart, and Eleanor held her for 2 hours without saying a word. I remembered all of it, and I held every memory against the woman standing in front of me. Now, the designer shoes, the rehearsed concern, the phone calls about $300,000 whispered over deviled eggs at her mother's funeral. I'm not signing, I said. The kitchen changed. I felt it the way you feel. A bridge deck shift under your boots, a vibration so subtle it doesn't register as sound, only as instinct. Brandon uncrossed his arms. Cynthia's jaw tightened. Vernon reached for the documents. Mr. Mercer, I strongly advise. No. Vernon paused. He looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at Cynthia. Cynthia looked at me. 3 sets of eyes. 3 calculations happening simultaneously. I had seen the same arithmetic in engineering reviews when a contractor realizes the inspector found the flaw they tried to hide. Put the documents away, Vernon, I said. And don't come back to this house. Vernon closed his briefcase. The latches snapped like small bones breaking. He stood, adjusted his tie, and walked to the front door without shaking my hand. I heard his car start 30 seconds later, the tires crunching gravel down the long driveway toward the county road. Brandon moved first. He stepped toward the table, both palms flat on the oak surface, leaning in until I could smell his cologne, that same heavy, synthetic musk from the funeral. Frank, he said quietly, you're making a mistake. Maybe. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand exactly what's at stake. $2.5 million. The farm. The retirement account. What's left of it? I paused. And my life. Brandon's eyes narrowed. For the first time since I'd known him, the mask slipped. Not all the way, just enough. The charming smile vanished. The polished voice dropped half an octave. What remained underneath was cold, mechanical, and utterly without mercy. You should have signed, Frank. He straightened, turned, and walked to the back porch. The screen door slapped shut behind him. Through the window, I watched him cross the yard toward the barn, pulling his phone from his pocket before he'd taken 10 steps. Cynthia lingered. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, her hands at her sides, looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between frustration and fear. For 1/2 second, I thought I saw the 7-year-old girl in the oversized bee veil. Then it was gone. You're going to regret this, Daddy, she said softly. She followed Brandon out the back door. I sat alone at the white oak table. The 3 yellow arrows on the unsigned documents stared up at me like caution signs on a highway. I pressed my palm flat against the wood and felt the butterfly keys beneath my fingers. The old walnut bowdies holding the cracks together. Eleanor's voice, from somewhere deep in memory. The table looked like it had scars that someone loved enough to repair. I pulled my beekeeper's hat from the hook by the door, set it on the table, and pressed the tiny microphone sewn into the brim. Everything they said was already recorded. Every word. 11 minutes. That's how long I sat at the oak table after Cynthia walked out. I know because I counted the ticks from the mantel clock Eleanor bought at a Biltmore Village antique shop in 2011. A brass ship's clock, with a cracked face, she said, gave it character. 11 minutes. 660 ticks, and every single one sounded like a hammer striking a nail into a coffin. Then I stood up. I went to the living room and checked the picture frame on the mantelpiece, the one Agent Reeves had given me. The miniature camera behind the glass was still blinking a faint red pulse, no larger than a firefly. I angled the frame 2 degrees left, so it covered the kitchen doorway and the back porch beyond. Then I returned to the kitchen, collected the unsigned documents Vernon had left behind, and placed them inside the card catalog drawer, under C for cross. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. Through the window I could see Brandon pacing near the honey barn, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand chopping the air the way men do when they're arguing with someone who has more power than they do. Ricky. It had to be Ricky. $300,000 by Friday. And Friday was 2 days away. Cynthia sat on the back porch steps, elbows on her knees, staring at the ground. From 50 feet away she looked small, almost like the girl who used to sit on those same steps shelling butterbeans with Eleanor on August evenings, dropping the pale green pods into a tin colander while fireflies blinked across the south pasture. Almost. But that girl would not have watched her mother die for money. I put on my beekeeper's hat, the wide-brimmed canvas, one with the sewn-in microphone, and walked out the back door. The air hit me first. October in the Blue Ridge carries a specific weight. Wood smoke, decaying leaves, Cold Creek water, and underneath it all the faint sweetness of the last goldenrod bloom before frost. The bees were still working. I could hear them from 40 yards, a low, collective hum that vibrated in my chest the way a bridge hums under load. 40 hives arranged in 2 crescents on the south-facing slope. Each one a small wooden city Eleanor and I had built together. I walked toward them. Not toward Cynthia on the porch. Not toward Brandon at the barn. Toward the hives. I needed to think the way bees think, in patterns. In purpose. In the absolute clarity of knowing what must be done next. Brandon saw me first. He ended his call, pocketed the phone, and intercepted me halfway across the yard. His stride was fast, aggressive. The walk of a man who has decided that persuasion is finished and force is what remains. Frank, we need to talk. We're talking. No. I mean, really talk. He stepped closer. I could smell the cologne again, synthetic, suffocating. You embarrassed Cynthia in there. You embarrassed me. And you made a very poor decision. I made the only decision. You think you're clever. The old beekeeper, sitting in his rocking chair, pretending to forget names. Brandon lowered his voice. I know you're not confused, Frank. I've known since the funeral. You heard us, didn't you? At the dessert table, my heart rate climbed. I felt it in my temples, in the tips of my fingers, but I kept my face still. 25 years of bridge inspections teaches you to stand on a crumbling deck and look bored. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Yes, you do. Brandon smiled. Not the charming smile he wore for neighbors and pastors. A different smile, the one underneath. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Vernon back. You're going to sign those 3 documents. And then you're going to hand over the insurance paperwork, the retirement account access codes, and the deed to this farm. All of it. By Friday. And if I don't? Brandon glanced at the hives. Old beekeepers have accidents, Frank. Bee stings. Allergic reactions. Falls in the barn. You're 60 years old. You live alone on 62 acres, and your wife just died. Nobody would question it. The words hung in the October air like smoke. I let them hang. I let the microphone in my hat catch every syllable, every inflection, every pause between the threat and the smile that followed it. Is that what you told Eleanor? I asked quietly. Brandon's smile vanished. What did you say? I asked if that's what you told my wife. Before you put antifreeze in her honey. Silence. The bees hummed. A red-tailed hawk circled the ridge above the south pasture, riding a thermal with its wings locked. The world held its breath. Brandon's face went through 3 changes in 2 seconds. Surprise. Calculation. And then something I had never seen in him before. Pure, unfiltered rage. You don't know what you're talking about, old man. Ethylene glycol, I said. 30 to 40 milliliters per jar. Mixed into the dark wildflower honey, because the color hides the clarity change. Administered once a week for 6 months, in the jars Cynthia delivered every Sunday. It metabolizes into glycolic acid and oxalic acid. forms calcium oxalate crystals in the kidneys, and mimics chronic renal failure. Eleanor's death certificate says acute kidney failure, but her best friend is a chemistry professor at UNC Asheville, and she tested the last jar. I watched Brandon's hands. They were shaking, not from fear, from the recognition that his architecture had been exposed, every beam and joint laid bare, the way I used to strip a bridge down to its skeleton in an inspection report. The FBI has the bank records, I continued. $520,000 withdrawn from Eleanor's retirement account. Forged signatures in Cynthia's handwriting. Eleanor's attorney, Howard Gentry, filed fraud charges 8 weeks before she died. She was changing her will, cutting Cynthia out. You knew that. So you accelerated the dosage. Brandon took one step toward me, then another. His right hand curled into a fist. Shut your mouth. Eleanor kept a notebook. Every symptom, every date, every jar. She hid it in her card catalog at the library drawer. M. Tab labeled Mercer, E.L. Restricted. She knew, Brandon. She knew for months, and she made sure I would find it. I said, shut your mouth. Brandon lunged. His hands found my throat before I could step back. The force drove me against the nearest hive stand. A wooden frame I had built from tulip poplar, bolted to a concrete pad. My head struck the edge of the upper super. Stars burst across my vision. I felt the vibration of 10,000 bees erupting from the disturbed hive, the pitch shifting from a hum to a roar. Brandon's fingers tightened. His thumbs pressed into my trachea. I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, his face at the center, teeth bared, veins standing in his neck. I reached for the brim of my hat and pressed the microphone twice. The emergency signal. Eleanor's gardenias. Then I heard Cynthia screaming from the porch, and behind her scream, growing louder, the sound of tires on gravel. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. The first thing I remember is the bees, not the hands around my throat, not the concrete pad cutting into my spine, not the black tunnel closing over my vision. The bees, 10,000 of them pouring from the toppled super in a spiraling column of gold and fury, their hum. No longer a hum, but a scream, the sound a hive makes when the queen is threatened. And every worker shifts from builder to soldier in the space of a single heartbeat. Brandon did not let go. His thumbs dug deeper. I felt my trachea compress, the cartilage bending inward like a plastic straw being pinched. My hands clawed at his wrists. Useless. He was 34. 6-1. 190. I was 60, 172. And I hadn't thrown a punch since a bar fight in Wichita Falls during my Air Force days in 1986. The math was simple. The math was fatal. Then the bees found him. The first sting hit his neck below the left ear. He flinched. The second hit his right hand, the one pressing hardest on my windpipe. The third, fourth, fifth came in rapid succession. Forehead, wrist, the soft skin between thumb and index finger. Eleanor and I had chosen Italian honeybees for their gentleness, their productivity. But when a colony is physically shaken, when the frames crack and the brood comb splits, they defend with everything they have. Brandon released my throat on the seventh sting. I rolled sideways off the concrete pad, gasping, pulling air through a windpipe that felt like a crushed garden hose. My vision was tunneled. Brandon stumbled backward, swatting at his face, the golden cloud swirling around his head like a living halo. He screamed. Not a word. A sound raw, animal, stripped of every layer of charm that had defined him for 6 years. Cynthia was running across the yard. I heard her heels snap off in the grass, one, then the other, and the slap of bare feet on October ground. She was screaming his name, not mine. His. The tires on gravel grew louder. 3 black SUVs crested the hill at the top of the driveway, in tight formation, tactical approach, staggered spacing. No hesitation. The lead vehicle's headlights cut through the late afternoon haze like searchlights. The doors opened before the vehicles stopped rolling. FBI. Everybody on the ground, hands visible. Do not move. 6 agents in black tactical vests fanned across the yard in pairs. 2 went to Brandon, who had dropped to his knees near the overturned hive, face swollen, hands raised, bees still circling. 2 went to Cynthia, frozen 15 feet from the porch, bare feet in cold grass, mouth open but silent. 2 came to me. Mr. Mercer? Frank Mercer? A young agent knelt beside me. Late 20s. Brown eyes. Name tag. Kowalski. I'm Frank, I whispered. My throat felt like someone had taken sandpaper to the inside. Don't move, sir. Medic's coming. I lay on the grass and stared at the sky. October in the Blue Ridge, faded denim, impossibly deep. The bees were settling. Their roar diminished to a murmur, then to the low, steady vibration I had known for 16 years. Honey leaked from the cracked frames in slow amber threads, pooling on the concrete pad like liquid gold. Agent Diana Reeves appeared above me. Dark hair pulled back, reading glasses on her forehead. Jaw tighter than the day we met in the federal building. Frank. Did the microphone transmit? I pressed it twice. We received everything. Every word. The field team recorded the full confrontation from the vehicle at the base of your driveway. Audio and visual. She paused. Brandon's threats, the assault, all of it. He admitted it. He didn't deny it. When you listed the evidence, ethylene glycol, the dosage, the forged signatures, the card catalog, he attacked you instead of refuting a single point. In federal court, that response is worth more than a written confession. Reeves turned to Kowalski. Get the medic. I want his throat photographed. Bruising, petechiae, everything. Then she crossed the yard, directing agents with that quiet federal authority. Secure the house. Kitchen photographed before anyone touches a surface. Picture frame on the mantle bag it as is. Card catalog drawer labeled C for cross. 3 unsigned legal documents inside. Brandon lay face down on the grass, wrists cuffed behind his back. His neck and hands were swollen, with at least 12 visible welts. The rage was gone, replaced by something emptier, the look of a man watching his own architecture collapse, the same expression I recognized from bridge sites when a contractor realizes the structure he built is about to be condemned. Cynthia sat on the ground near the porch, knees drawn to her chest, a female agent beside her. She was not screaming anymore. She stared at the grass between her bare feet, with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life, the face of someone who has realized every door behind them is locked and every door ahead is made of iron. She did not look at me. I wanted her to. God help me. I wanted my daughter to look at me the way she did when she was 7. And a bee landed on her wrist, and she turned to me with wide, terrified eyes, and I said, "Stay still, baby. She won't hurt you. She's just learning who you are." But Cynthia did not look up. An EMT documented my throat, 4 fingerprint bruises on the left side, 3 on the right, and fitted a cervical collar. They wanted Mission Hospital. I refused. I had spent enough time in that building. Jerry's truck appeared at 5:30. He parked behind the last SUV, walked across the yard with Eleanor's composition notebook in a plastic bag, and handed it to Agent Reeves. Then he sat down next to me on the back porch steps and put his hand on my shoulder. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The honey barn was sealed with yellow tape. The cracked hive lifted onto a flatbed for lab analysis. Vernon Cross's documents bagged and labeled. My farm processed like a crime scene, which is exactly what it was. The last light of October painted the Blue Ridge in shades of amber and gold, the colors Eleanor used to call God's apology for winter. The bees were quiet now. Honey seeped into the grass where the broken frames lay, catching the fading sun. I closed my eyes and breathed. It hurt. Every breath scraped through my bruised throat like air through a rusted pipe. But I breathed. The hive had broken open. And what poured out was the truth. 3 days after the arrest, Agent Reeves called me at 6 in the morning. I was already awake. I had not slept past 4 since Eleanor died. And now, with the bruises on my throat turning from purple to green, sleep came in fragments, 20 minutes here, 40 there, each piece shaped like a broken frame from a cracked hive. Frank, I need you at the federal building by 9. There's been a development. What kind of development? The kind that changes the case. I drove the winding 2-lane from the farm into Asheville with the windows down. The mountains were deep into autumn now, sourwood trees blazing red, hickories going gold. The occasional white oak still holding its brown leaves like fists refusing to open. Eleanor loved this drive. She used to name every tree we passed as if they were neighbors. That sourwood is Margaret. That hickory is Old Tom. I never told her I memorized every name. The federal building smelled the same recycled air, burnt coffee, paper. Reeves met me in a second-floor conference room with a long table, a projection screen, and 2 people I had not seen before. One was a man in his 50s with silver hair and a Navy suit, Assistant U.S. Attorney James Hadley. The other was a woman in her 30s. Dark-framed glasses. A laptop open in front of her, forensic accountant, Dr. Lisa Chen. "Sit down, Frank," Reeves said. "This is going to take a while." Hadley spoke first. His voice was measured. Practice the voice of a man who builds cases the way I used to build bridges. One beam at a time. "Mr. Mercer, after Brandon Blake's arrest, we executed search warrants on 3 locations. Your daughter's apartment in West Asheville, Brandon Blake's storage unit on Tunnel Road, and the offices of Pure Path Wellness in the River Arts District. What we found changes the scope of this investigation from a domestic poisoning case to a federal racketeering case." He nodded to Dr. Chen. She turned her laptop toward me and began. Pure Path Wellness was incorporated in Delaware in 2019 with 2 listed partners, Brandon Blake and Ricardo "Ricky" Salerno. On the surface, the company sold dietary supplements, turmeric capsules, collagen powders, vitamin blends. Revenue from legitimate sales averaged approximately $110,000 per year. Modest. Barely profitable. She clicked to the next screen. But the company maintained a second set of books. These were recovered from an encrypted drive in Brandon's storage unit. Between 2020 and 2024, PurePath received wire transfers totaling $4.2 million from 3 shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands. The shell companies trace back to Ricky Salerno's family network, specifically his uncle, Dominic Salerno, who operates a construction firm in Newark, New Jersey, currently under federal investigation for money laundering. I sat very still. The room felt smaller. The $4.2 million was laundered through PurePath as fictitious supplement orders, Chen continued. Brandon handled the books. He created fake invoices, fake shipping manifests, fake customer records. In return, he received a 12% commission, roughly $500,000 over 4 years. $500,000, I said. That's close to what they stole from Eleanor. Exactly, Reeves said. We believe Brandon lost most of his commission through gambling. Online sports betting, primarily. His accounts show deposits and withdrawals consistent with a severe gambling addiction, rapid cycles, escalating amounts, catastrophic losses. By early 2024, he owed Ricky Salerno approximately $300,000 in personal debts, separate from the laundering operation. Hadley leaned forward. This is the pressure point, Mr. Mercer. Brandon owed Ricky money he could not repay. Ricky, in turn, answered to Dominic Salerno in Newark. The debt created a chain of leverage. Ricky pressured Brandon. Dominic pressured Ricky. Brandon's solution was to access your wife's assets. When Eleanor discovered the theft and hired an attorney, Brandon escalated to murder. The word sat in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Murder. Not accident. Not tragedy. Not kidney failure. Murder. Committed by a man who sat at my oak table and ate my wife's cornbread and smiled at me across the Sunday honey jars. There's more. Reeves said quietly. She placed a photograph on the table. It showed a man I did not recognize. Mid-40s, dark hair, angular face, expensive leather jacket. He was standing outside a restaurant in what appeared to be a city street. Beside him, half turned toward the camera, was Brandon Blake. They were close. Not business close. The kind of close that has nothing to do with business. This is Ricky Salerno, Reeves said. Taken by our surveillance team in Charlotte, 14 months ago. We have 17 photographs spanning 2 years. Hotel records in Charlotte, Greenville, and Savannah. Text messages recovered from Brandon's second phone, a prepaid device found in his storage unit. She paused, letting me understand. Brandon and Ricky were in a relationship, she said. Romantic and sexual. It began approximately 3 years ago, during the period Brandon was deepening his involvement with PurePath. I looked at the photograph. Brandon's face in profile. Caught mid-laugh. His hand on Ricky's shoulder. The same hand that had wrapped around my throat 3 days ago. The same hand that had delivered honey jars to my wife every Sunday morning. Does Cynthia know? I asked. We don't believe so. Not yet. I closed my eyes. The layers kept peeling back, each one uglier than the last. My daughter married a man who laundered money for a crime family, gambled away $500,000, carried on a secret affair with his business partner, and when the debts closed in, poisoned my wife with antifreeze mixed into the honey she trusted, because it came from her own daughter's hands. And Cynthia, my Cynthia, had she known about the poison? Had she measured the doses? Or had she only known about the money, the theft, the forged signatures, and looked away, because Brandon told her it would be fine, because love makes people believe the most dangerous lies? I did not have answers yet. But the federal government did, and they were building a case with the patience and precision of a cathedral mason setting stones. Hadley gathered his papers. We're seeking indictments on multiple counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, wire fraud, embezzlement, racketeering under RICO, and assault on a federal witness. That's the attack on you, Mr. Mercer. Brandon Blake and Cynthia Blake will be arraigned separately. Ricky Salerno was arrested in Charlotte this morning. Dominic Salerno is the subject of a concurrent investigation by the Newark field office. Reeves walked me to the elevator. The hallway was quiet. Just our footsteps on government tile. Frank, she said, you should know Eleanor's notebook, the card catalog, the honey samples, your recorded confrontation. Without those, we had financial evidence but no murder case. You gave us the bridge between the money and the body. Your wife gave us the blueprint. I nodded. I could not speak. Outside, the October sun hit my face, and I stood on the federal building steps for a long time, watching the cars pass on Patton Avenue, watching the mountains hold their colors against a sky so blue it looked painted. Eleanor would have named every tree on that ridge. That sourwood is Margaret. That hickory is Old Tom. I drove home to an empty farm, walked past the yellow tape on the honey barn, and sat on the back porch steps where my daughter used to shell butter beans. The bees hummed from the remaining hives, steady and unbroken, the way they always do when the danger has passed, and the queen is safe, and the work of rebuilding has already begun. The bees knew. They always knew. The federal courthouse in Asheville sits on Otis Street, a limestone building with tall windows, and a flagpole out front that catches the wind off the French Broad River. I had driven past it 1,000 times in 30 years, and never once imagined I would walk through its doors as the primary witness in a murder trial. But on a Tuesday morning in June, 8 months after Eleanor collapsed in our honey barn, I put on the same dark suit I wore to her funeral, knotted the same navy tie, and drove downtown with Jerry Whitfield sitting beside me in the passenger seat. Neither of us saying a word. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Federal courtrooms lack the drama of television. No mahogany galleries, no vaulted ceilings. Room 3A had fluorescent lights, beige walls, a judge's bench made of laminated oak, and rows of padded chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. It smelled like floor wax and old paper. Judge Catherine Hargrove presided, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and reading glasses she wore on a silver chain. She had a reputation for precision and zero tolerance for theatrics. Brandon Blake sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, flanked by two attorneys from a Charlotte firm his family had retained. He had lost weight. His face was thinner, his cheekbones sharper, and the bee-sting scars on his neck had faded to pale pink dots that looked like a constellation nobody wanted to name. He did not look at me. He stared at the table surface with the fixed concentration of a man memorizing the grain of the wood, as if the answers to his life were hidden in its pattern. Cynthia sat at a separate table. Her attorney, a public defender named Margaret Yoon, had negotiated a severed trial. Cynthia's case would be heard independently, after Brandon's. Cynthia wore a gray dress I did not recognize. Her hair was pulled back, no jewelry, no designer sunglasses. She looked like a photograph of herself taken in a room with bad lighting, the same features, but all the brightness removed. She glanced at me once when I entered. Our eyes met for perhaps 2 seconds, then she looked away, and I felt something crack inside my chest that I knew would never fully heal. AUSA James Hadley presented the government's case over 4 days. He was methodical, unhurried, building each argument the way a bricklayer builds a wall. One fact, one document, one witness at a time, until the structure was so solid you could lean your full weight against it. Day 1 established the financial crimes. Dr. Lisa Chen walked the jury through the Pure Path wellness books, the real ones and the fraudulent ones. She explained the $4.2 million laundered through Cayman shell companies, the fake invoices, the 12% commission. She showed the jury Brandon's gambling records, 23 online betting accounts, deposits totaling $612,000 over 3 years, net losses of $489,000. She displayed the forged signatures on Eleanor's retirement account withdrawals, $520,000 taken in increments, designed to avoid automatic bank alerts. A handwriting expert from the FBI lab in Quantico confirmed the signatures matched Cynthia's hand, not Eleanor's. Day 2 was the poison. Professor Patricia Langford testified about the honey jar, the ethylene glycol concentration, the metabolic pathway that mimics kidney failure. She brought the original jar sealed in an evidence bag, the handwritten label still visible. From Cynthia's Harvest, October batch. The Duke toxicologist, Dr. Raymond Holt, confirmed that the dosage 2 to 3 milliliters daily over 6 months was consistent with deliberate, sustained poisoning by someone with pharmaceutical knowledge. He used the phrase, calculated lethality, and I watched 2 jurors write it down. Day 3 was Eleanor's voice. Hadley introduced the composition notebook from the card catalog, every entry read aloud by a court clerk, while the jury followed along on projected images. January 8th. Metallic taste. January 22nd. Nausea only with Cynthia's honey. February 3rd. Dizziness. March 1st. Weight down 14 pounds. The entries continued through spring and summer, each one more desperate, each one more precise, until the final shaking line on October 3rd. Frank, check the honey. The card catalog has everything. I love you. The courtroom was silent. I heard a juror in the back row exhale. I heard the court reporter's fingers stop moving. Judge Hargrove removed her reading glasses and set them on the bench, and for a moment she was not a judge but a woman listening to another woman's last words. Day 4 was my testimony. I sat in the witness chair and told the story from the beginning. The collapse in the honey barn, the funeral, Patricia's phone call, the FBI meeting, the card catalog, the longest night, the signing table, the confrontation in the apiary. Hadley guided me through each point with the patience of a man who knows the bridge is strong and only needs the inspector to confirm it. Then, he played the recordings. The courtroom heard Brandon's voice through ceiling-mounted speakers, clear, undistorted, captured by the microphone in my beekeeper's hat and the camera in the picture frame. They heard him threaten me at the oak table. They heard him say, "Old beekeepers have accidents." They heard him say, "You should have signed, Frank." They heard the sound of his hands on my throat and the roar of 10,000 bees defending their hive. Brandon's lead attorney, a tall man named Garrett Price, cross-examined me for 90 minutes. He questioned my hearing, my memory, my emotional state, my relationship with the FBI. He suggested I had been coached, manipulated, turned into a weapon by overzealous federal agents. I answered every question, the way I used to write. Inspection reports with facts, measurements, and dates. No opinions, no embellishments. When Price asked if I hated my son-in-law, I said, "I don't hate anyone. I just read the data." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned at 4:17 on a Friday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, wire fraud, embezzlement, RICO violations, assault on a federal witness. Judge Hargrove sentenced Brandon Blake to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. He stood motionless when the sentence was read. No reaction, no outburst. He stared at the laminated oak of the judge's bench, the same way he had stared at the defense table, searching the grain for something that was never there. Ricky Salerno, arrested in Charlotte, pleaded guilty to money laundering and conspiracy charges in a separate proceeding. He received 18 years. Dominic Salerno's case in Newark remained ongoing. Tangled in the slow machinery of federal racketeering investigations that grind forward like glaciers. Cynthia's trial came 5 weeks later. Margaret Yoon presented a defense built on coercion. Brandon controlled the finances. Brandon obtained the ethylene glycol. Brandon directed the dosing schedule. Cynthia was a victim of manipulation, Yoon argued. A woman trapped in an abusive marriage who participated under duress. The jury did not fully agree. They convicted Cynthia of second-degree murder, conspiracy, and embezzlement. They acquitted her of the RICO charges. Judge Hargrove sentenced her to 25 years, with the possibility of parole after 15. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was read. Cynthia turned and looked at me the first time she had truly looked at me since the day of the arrest. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but I have read enough faces in my life to know what she said. "I'm sorry, Daddy." I nodded. Once. Then I stood, walked out of the courtroom, through the limestone corridor, past the flagpole catching the river wind, and drove home to a farm where the bees were already building new comb in the repaired hive, filling the frames with fresh wax, starting over the way bees always do, not because they forget what was lost, but because building is the only language they know. The call came on a Thursday in November, 13 months after Eleanor's death, and 5 weeks after Cynthia's sentencing. I was in the honey barn, repairing the frame Brandon had cracked when he shoved me into the hive stand. The wood had split along the grain, a clean fracture, the kind you can fix with glue and butterfly keys if you have patience. I was measuring a walnut bow tie when my phone rang. The caller ID said Federal Women's Detention Center, Alderson, West Virginia. "Daddy." Cynthia's voice was different, smaller. The rehearsed confidence was gone. The designer catalog polish stripped away by 5 weeks of institutional food, fluorescent light, and a 6x9 cell shared with a woman serving 12 years for wire fraud. What remained was something I had not heard since she was a child. A tremor at the edges. A fragility that could have been real or could have been the last performance of a woman who had spent her adult life performing. "Daddy, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "I'm pregnant." The walnut bow tie slipped from my fingers and hit the barn floor. I stared at the cracked frame in front of me and felt the world shift the way a bridge deck shifts in an earthquake. Not a collapse, but a lateral movement. Everything sliding 2 inches to the left, every measurement suddenly wrong. How far along? 14 weeks. The prison doctor confirmed it yesterday. They did an ultrasound. She paused. It's a boy. I sat down on the barn stool, the three-legged one Eleanor made from a hickory stump, and pressed my free hand against my forehead. A boy. My grandchild. Growing inside a woman serving 25 years for murdering his grandmother with antifreeze mixed into honey, the mathematics of this family had become so twisted that no engineer on earth could diagram the load paths. Who's the father? I asked. Though I already knew. Brandon. Of course. Brandon Blake, currently housed in USP Lee in Pennington Gap, Virginia. Serving life without parole. 214 miles from the woman carrying his child. A man who laundered millions, gambled away his commission, carried on a secret affair with Ricky Salerno, poisoned my wife, and strangled me in my own apiary. That man's blood was now mingled with my daughter's blood, and together they had made a child who would enter this world with a legacy of honey and poison and broken frames. What do you want me to do, Cynthia? She was crying. I could hear it through the prison phone's static, not the theatrical tears from the funeral, but something rawer, wetter, the kind of crying that comes from a place below performance. I can't raise him in here, Daddy. I can't. He'll go into the system. Foster care. He won't know who he is. He won't know about the farm, or the bees, or Mama's card catalog, or any of it. She took a shaking breath. I'm asking you to take him. Please. I closed my eyes. The barn smelled like beeswax and tulip poplar, and the faint ghost of Eleanor's lavender hand cream that had soaked into every wooden surface she ever touched. I thought about what she would say. I thought about it for a long time. Eleanor would have said yes before the question was finished. I'll take him, I said. Elijah Frank Mercer was born on May 15th at the medical unit of FWC Alderson. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, 21 inches, brown eyes. Eleanor's eyes. The color of sourwood honey, held up to afternoon light. Cynthia was allowed to hold him for 48 hours under supervised visitation. Then a social worker named Diane Prescott drove him 4 hours across the West Virginia state line into North Carolina, up the winding 2-lane road through the Blue Ridge, and placed him in my arms on the front porch of the farmhouse at 6:17 in the evening. He was wrapped in a white hospital blanket. His fists were clenched. His mouth was open in a silent yawn that showed pink gums and no teeth. And the absolute trust of a creature who has not yet learned that the world contains people who will hurt you. I held him the way I held Cynthia 34 years earlier, left arm cradled, right hand supporting the head, chin tucked so I could feel his breath against my neck. He weighed almost nothing. He weighed everything. Jerry stood in the driveway, leaning against his truck, watching. He did not come up the steps. He understood that some moments belong only to the people inside them. But when I looked up, he nodded. One nod. The same nod he gave me the night he sat on these steps after the FBI raid and put his hand on my shoulder without a word. I carried Elijah inside. The house was ready. I had spent 3 weeks preparing Eleanor's reading room as a nursery, repainting the walls, a pale yellow that matched the sunflower apron Cynthia once wore, assembling a crib from white oak I milled myself, hanging a mobile of wooden bees I carved with a pocket knife during the long evenings when the farm was quiet and grief was loud. The card catalog still stood against the far wall, all 60 drawers closed, the brass pulls polished. Eleanor's composition notebook was back in its place, drawer M, tab marked Mercer, E.L., restricted. I wanted it there. I wanted Elijah to grow up in a room where his grandmother's voice lived inside a wooden cabinet, waiting for the day he was old enough to read it. The first year was the hardest. I was 61 years old, alone on a 62-acre farm, learning to warm formula at 2 in the morning, to change diapers with hands calloused from decades of bridge work, to sing lullabies I half remembered from songs Eleanor used to hum in the kitchen. I made mistakes. I heated the bottle too long. I put the diaper on backward twice in the first week. I fell asleep in the rocking chair with Elijah on my chest and woke at dawn with his small hand gripping my shirt collar, holding on. Jerry came every Saturday. He brought groceries, fixed whatever needed fixing, and held Elijah while I showered or napped or simply sat on the porch and stared at the mountains until the tightness in my chest loosened enough to breathe. Patricia Langford visited monthly, bringing children's books from the university bookstore and reading to Elijah in a voice that reminded me so much of Eleanor's that I had to leave the room. By his first birthday, Elijah could crawl from the living room to the card catalog in under a minute. He would pull himself up on the lowest drawer, the A drawer, and slap the brass pull with his palm, laughing at the sound. I let him. Eleanor would have let him. By 3, he followed me to the hives. I built him a tiny beekeeper's veil from window screen and an old straw hat, and he stood beside me in the apiary, watching the bees move across the frames with the same wide-eyed stillness his mother once had. He did not swat. He did not flinch. He watched. "Grandpa," he said one morning, pointing at a bee crawling across his gloved hand. "She's learning who I am." I turned away so he would not see my face. 13 years is a long time to raise a child alone. It is also no time at all. I know this because I blinked, and the boy who once slapped the brass pull on drawer A was suddenly taller than the card catalog itself, lean and brown-eyed and quiet in the way Eleanor was quiet, not shy, not withdrawn, but listening. Always listening. As if the world were a book, he was reading one sentence at a time. Elijah turned 13 on a Tuesday in May. I baked a lopsided chocolate cake using Eleanor's recipe, the one taped inside the cabinet above the stove, written in her careful librarian's cursive on a yellowed index card. Every year I overmixed the batter, and the layers came out uneven. Elijah ate 2 slices, fed a crumb to the barn cat, and said, "Grandpa, this is the best bad cake I've ever had." He had her humor, the dry kind that sneaks up on you like October frost. By 13, he could manage the hives alone. He knew the smoker rhythm: 2 puffs at the entrance, 1 across the tops of the frames, wait 30 seconds. He could spot a failing queen by the brood pattern, test for varroa mites with a sugar roll, extract honey without crushing a single bee. He kept a journal, not because I asked. Because he had found Eleanor's composition notebook in drawer M when he was 9 years old, read every entry sitting cross-legged on the nursery floor for 3 hours, and looked up at me and said, "Grandma wrote things down so they wouldn't disappear. I want to do that too." I did not hide the truth from him. The notebook told the story in Eleanor's own hand, and when Elijah was old enough, 10, maybe 11, I sat with him on the back porch steps and answered every question. Who poisoned Grandma? Why? What happened to his mother? What happened to his father? I told him about the honey, the antifreeze, the card catalog, the FBI, the trial, the apiary, where the bees defended me when no one else could. I told him about the oak table and the butterfly keys and the unsigned documents. I told him everything, because Eleanor believed that truth was the only foundation worth building on. He cried once. Only once. When I told him his mother had delivered the honey jars every Sunday for 6 months, he went to the apiary and sat among the hives for an hour. Veil on, gloves off, letting the bees land on his bare hands. When he came back, his eyes were dry and his jaw was set in a way that reminded me of Eleanor, determined, clear, already planning the next sentence. "I want to visit her," he said. We drove to Alderson on a Saturday in March. 4 hours through the mountains, dogwoods just beginning to bloom. Elijah wore a clean button-down shirt and carried a jar of spring honey from our hive's wildflower and sourwood blend, the first extraction of the season. The label read, "Mercer Farm Honey, Asheville, NC." I had written it myself. The visitation room was beige and bright. Cynthia came through a metal door in a khaki uniform, hair shorter, face thinner, hands clasped the way prisoners learn, compact, contained. She was 47. She looked 60. She saw Elijah and stopped walking. He stood from the plastic chair. 5'7", still growing. Eleanor's eyes, Cynthia's cheekbones, a posture shaped by 13 years of standing beside beehives in mountain wind. He held out the honey jar. "I'm Elijah. I brought you something from the farm." Cynthia took the jar with both hands, turning it slowly, reading the label. She looked at me over his shoulder, and in her eyes I saw something I had waited 15 years to see. Not rehearsed tears, not calculated silence, but genuine recognition of what she had destroyed and what, impossibly, had grown in its place. "Thank you," she whispered. She was not talking about the honey. They sat together for 90 minutes. Elijah told her about the hives, the farm, his school, his journal, the chocolate cake I ruined every year. Cynthia listened. She did not perform. She listened the way Eleanor used to, completely, without interruption, as if the person speaking was the most important sentence in the only book that mattered. When the guard called time, Cynthia hugged Elijah. 11 seconds, I counted. Then, she walked through the metal door without turning around. In the parking lot, Elijah sat in the truck a long time before speaking. "She's different. Maybe. Do you forgive her, Grandpa?" I watched a pair of red-tailed hawks circle above the West Virginia ridgeline, riding thermals with locked wings. Forgiveness isn't a door you open once. It's a bridge you build one day at a time. Some days you lay a beam. Some days you just stand at the edge and look at the other side. Are you still building? Every day. We drove home through the mountains. Dogwoods white against dark ridges. Valleys turning gold. Eleanor's gold. God's apology for winter. Elijah fell asleep past Marion, his head against the window, the empty honey jar in his lap. I pulled into the farm at dusk. The bees were settling, their hum dropping to the low frequency that means all queens are safe. All brood is warm. All stores are full. Eleanor's gardenias along the south wall had spread into a thick hedge, and in May they opened white flowers so sweet the bees worked them from dawn until dark. I never replanted them. I let them grow the way Eleanor would have, trusting that roots go where they need to go. I sat on the back porch steps, the same steps where Eleanor shelled butter beans, where Jerry sat beside me the night the FBI took my daughter, where a social worker placed a 7-pound baby in my arms at 6:17 on a May evening and changed the load-bearing calculation of my entire life. The gardenias filled the air. The bees hummed. The mountains held their last light. And I understood what Eleanor tried to tell me in the notebook, in the card catalog, in every jar of honey she placed on our table. That love is not a feeling. Love is a structure. It bears weight. It cracks. It can be poisoned and broken. But if someone cares enough to cut the butterfly keys and set them into the fractures, it holds. It holds. Honey is patience turned golden. And I have been patient a very long time. If this story moved you, leave a comment below telling me what you would have done in Frank's place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And share this with someone who needs to hear that even broken things can be rebuilt.